Hi everyone, and welcome to our first AI talk. Today we have Aleksander Molak with us. Welcome.
Hi everyone.
How are you
Thank you
today,
for
Alexander?
I'm very good, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Yeah, so we have a little bit of history, I would say. Been together at some of the Deep Learning Labs event. I think it was probably 1.5 years ago now,
I think it
around.
was more. I think it was more actually. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, but I don't.
Awesome. We choose to invite you because I think you have a very interesting background, and I would love to learn a bit more in general what got you into AI to start with, and what you work with today, and kind of how the future look. Would you like to start with maybe telling a little bit what have you been up to for the last since I talked with you last time, so last 2 years?
Last 2 years I spent first at Lingaro. Lingaro is an international consulting company. I call it a data house, so as a software house, but specializing in data. And at Lingaro, I was working as an innovation lead, machine learning engineer and researcher, I was working with mainly global customers from Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 list, and designing and building large-scale AI systems for them with my team. And then in December, I decided to take a little break, gap 2 months, and I focused on writing blog, just joined life. In February, I started working with Ironscales. I moved to Tel Aviv and started working with Ironscales. Ironscales is one of the best known and fastest growing messaging security companies in the world currently. We are in INC 5000 list. So it's a startup. It's a relatively young company, but with pretty good financing. So in the last round, we were able to secure over $64 million in the last round. And we are working on one hand on automating phishing and other types of attacks detection for mostly for corporate clients. On the other hand, we have a very strong branch in security training and awareness training. What we are trying to do is always have machine and human engaged in the process, right? We have analysts and so on, and our AI systems are pretty good today, but still we deeply believe that because of the nature of phishing attacks and other types of attacks, human in the loop is always beneficial. So we are not planning to eliminate humans. We're rather aiming at building effective collaboration between humans and machines in this regard.
Definitely. So I would love to talk, and we will talk a bit more about what you're doing right now. First, I would just like to learn a bit like how did you get into AI to start with? Like how did this whole journey begin for you?
It depends, like where we want to start the story, right? My first encounter with computers was very early in my life. So I was maybe 4, 5, 6 years old when we had the first computer at home. It was something very simple and very old school. But then when I was like 6, 7 years old, I was writing a little bit of programs in a programming language called BASIC. I don't know, maybe some of you are aware of this. And maybe that's significant. One of the programs that I wrote was a piano, so you could use keyboard, like computer keyboard, to play sounds and play melodies. I said that maybe it's significant because before I started in machine learning, I used to work as a music producer, a record and mixing engineer. I had my own studio, my own production company, and I work with the artists from pretty much all over the world. At some stage, I decided to start my second degree program. It was in psychology, experimental social psychology, with elements of neuroscience and advanced statistics and stuff. And then I heard about statistics there, and I really loved this topic. So I started digging deeper and deeper. I asked one of my colleagues who was doing a joint program in psychology and computer science, what's going on in computer science nowadays, because since I was like 7 or maybe 10 years old, I just stopped doing anything with computers. And she told me about Python. I started reading about this, and reading about Python and statistics in like early 2010 inevitably led me to learning about machine learning. And when I heard about it, I was just very deeply fascinated by this topic. I just immediately said I want to understand how it works. It touches like many topics that are very deeply interesting to the nature of knowledge, the nature of how we learn, human beings as animals, as complex animals. What is possible? The nature of information. What is it, and how can it be used? So this was pretty intense love affair from the first sight.
So was it NLP that catch your attention from the beginning, or was that kind of something you got into later on?
It was definitely something that I got into later on. Also, like a part of my first degree that I was studying, it was philosophy, in particular philosophy of language. So those topics in NLP were also, I felt, connected to them. But I started with general machine learning, definitely. In particular, I was interested in classification. I found it more interesting the regression problems in the beginning. But going to NLP was a journey, and it was not my first choice. But when I was working at Lingaro, it turned out that for some projects, partially because of my knowledge of linguistics that I had from my philosophy studies, and the fact that I like languages in general, I had some background that was helpful to move things a little bit faster. And this is how I got more serious about NLP. So I just was engaged in some projects, and then I started learning more and more.
Yeah, you're definitely the right path then, looking at the massive progression that the space have been seeing over the last couple of years. I was myself quite skeptical to NLP just a couple of years back, and thought it would be problematic to get to such a level that we can see today. Or what is your are you surprised over the progression within the space that we have seen, especially say the last 3 years?
I think it's very, very interesting what you said. So there are two things that I think are very worth commenting from what you said. So first, you said that it was a good choice. But actually, when I was studying with NLP, it seemed that a much better choice is to go to computer vision, right? Because it was still time when this field was growing very, very quickly, and it was just insane. Second part of your question regarding if I'm surprised, yes, I was somehow surprised that the progress was so fast. Though I must say from my professional experience that I still see many use cases where very, very simple methods outperform very complex methods, right? This is not the very popular topic in discussions regarding NLP. Probably everybody prefer to talk about amazing stuff that this new architectures like transformers and combined architectures like diffusion models with transformers and CLIP and this DALI 2 and so on, what they're capable of. But still, I see relatively many use cases where very simple methods can give you very good results. And I think it's worthwhile remembering that those simple methods are exponentially less computationally expensive, right? So this also translates to the fact that they are easier to maintain and they are cheaper, much cheaper to and also easier to productionalize, right? That said, of course, the new methods are very exciting, and the capability, the growth of the field is just amazing.
I agree with you, and I find it very exciting how, I mean, we have one part that is people like you that have a extremely deep technical and low level, as we say in tech, understanding about technology. I find it really interesting how this new, especially within transformers, kind of are opening up the field for a totally different group of people to actually experiment and build things around it. Because if we just reverse back a few years, someone that were not really seasoned in Python and this space would have a big problem even getting anything working, basically, while we today, especially around when we do events on the now called lablab.ai platform, we really see great result when we put diverse teams together. So teams that have both one half is very technical and the other half is not technical at all. Basically, they don't think in technical terms. What do you believe? Like, what is AI doing for computing in your world? Do you think it are changing the way we build and interact with things? Or I would like to understand a bit your view of, say, where we are today and how do you think AI will impact day-to-day computing in the say next 5 years?
I think that's very interesting. It's a great question. Start with what you mentioned regarding the AI space opening for less technical people, because I think this is a very interesting direction and highly underrated and not that vividly discussed in the community, right? Maybe it's partially because in the community there are many, or mainly there are technical people, and they prefer to focus on what is interesting to them. But I think this is a very interesting direction. And those high-level interfaces to interact with the models. And I think you can see this how people interact with DALL-E 2, right? So you have people who are interested in technology but are not technical people. When I go on LinkedIn, I see many things like, people just getting access to the API, and even though they are not programmers or AI experts, technical sense, they just interact with this. They create something and they share it. And I think this is something very interesting. I think there might be a very large potential in this field. So the field of providing AI tools for creativity for people who are not technical experts. Second part of your question about my belief regarding how AI will impact how people interact with technology. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct of the question?
Yes, exactly.
I think there are two perspectives here, right? One obvious perspective is technological and like what we can provide in terms of like solving some well-defined problems. And another perspective is, I would call it a UX perspective, right? So all those technologies or all this technology might be used to improve people experience. And I think we already see this happening from since a couple of years. For instance, all those like voice assistants and so on. I feel like Google Assistant is something that's so smoothly integrated into other types of systems that most people don't even think about that there's like some advanced computing behind it. And I think that from business point of view, maybe this is the future. So building such smooth integrations of advanced technology into everyday life, into appliances that we use every day, like phones, fridges, and all that we don't even notice that there is something like this. But it still impacts our life quality in the sense that we can do things faster and more efficient.
Do you have any experience using systems such as Codex or GitHub Copilot in your day-to-day work? Just to explain for people listening, so Codex is kind of a spin-off of GPT-3, trained on especially code. Available as I think it's still in closed beta. We have, when people come to our events, we onboard them on it. Personally, what I see there is a lot of, say, the command layer going away. Like expertise are super relevant because you need to know what you want, but you maybe necessarily doesn't have to shop every button to make it happen. Have you tried any of these things, and what is your point of view of it? Because I know it's always like in the AI world have always been and probably still are extremely divided. So I would love to understand, what is your point of view of this? Is it okay to use a system that partly can automate code writing, or is this your art form where no automation should happen? So
I guess for some people it might be personal, right? That someone or something is writing the code for them, and it feels like, I don't know, maybe taking off something from them in the creative process. And I think that's an understandable point of view. I also think about more and more advanced technologies in music production, right? Where is my part of my previous background is as well. I remember many people reacting even to samplers that were imitating, for instance, like acoustic instruments like violin and so on. At some point, those samples became very, very good. Some people were just like, this is just like, it will never be as good as human, and we cannot use it. Like this will take work away from people and so on and so on. So far, I don't see this happen. But I understand that for somebody who is very closely related to the fact that they are doing something with their own hands, and it's a creative process, this might be maybe threatening or maybe somehow something hard to accept. That said, I think these tools are just useful. I tried them in my personal account, and I think sometimes they are pretty amazing, really. I mean, I tried some examples that were not, examples from the book. It was something, let's say, less popular, right? And they were doing pretty good job. My opinion is, why not to use them? They can speed up your process, write documentation for you maybe, write even the structure of the function. It just makes the creative process much more efficient, much faster. And if we can do it, look, it's a little bit about human nature and how our brain works. Our working memory can only hold 4 up to 7 items at the same time. And 7 is really... It's rare that that's happened. So now, if you have an idea and if you have a fast stream of thought, how to implement this idea, it's virtually impossible that you write all of this life with your fingers. So these tools are very, very good in this regard, and they can enhance creativity, contrary to what some people might feel, but they might in fact enhance your creativity by providing you a bridge between your brain and your computer that is just much faster and much more efficient than using your physical interface, your hand.
I totally agree with what you are saying, and either I can go to Google and I Google how to figure out how to get this base of this function, or I can use a tool, say like Codex, and I can get it there. But many people might see it in such a way that, okay, then it writes the code. But no, it's still like the person there are still the creator. You are the one still who need to look at this function, tweak it, get it the way you want, and create it. So I very much agree with you. It's something that enhances possibilities of creativity a lot. I would like to know a bit, because what we can see looking both at data and release of new models and applications, it seems like things are speeding up a lot. So one example with the DALL-E 2, so it was released a couple of months ago, and normally there is a cycle of 1-2 years before you can see something coming out that are even better. Now in this case, I think just a couple of weeks, very few months after Google released a new model called, remember the name?
Imagine.
Imagine, yes, exactly. Do you see this also like a rapid kind of the speed of progression increasing? And if so, what do you believe is the driving factor behind it?
I definitely see the speed of progression increasing, especially in like multi-model or cross-model models. So this is the topic. I remember it was late 2020. And I remember myself just taking a walk and reading a paper. There was a survey paper for multimodal and cross-model machine learning, and everything there was so much less advanced than what happened after, just like a couple months after I read this paper, and it was a very fresh paper at the time. We just got like exponentially higher in a couple of months. So this is very fast. I feel like in multimodal or cross-model and all these families of mixing modalities in this area, we now experience something similar to what happened with vision in like early 2010s, right? So you just have like 1, 2, 3 things, and this like everything is better than what was before, or what we experienced in NLP. It was very similar. I don't know if you remember. We had LSTMs, like bidirectional LSTMs. Then suddenly Elmo appeared, and I finished reading the Elmo paper, and there was already BERT paper. We started implementing, now one of our projects, we started implementing Elmo, and we haven't finished, and there was already bird that was beating Elmo on most of the metrics, right? So that was pretty crazy. So I feel what is happening in with those generative multimodal models now is very similar. And I think what DALL-E 2 is able to accomplish is pretty astonishing. I remember people telling over last 5-7 years, I remember many people saying like, I don't believe that machines can be creative, they can be creative. Now I don't hear these voices. There's also large progress in this regard in music generation. I don't know if you were following this field, but sometimes it's difficult to today's really there are algorithms that are generating music. It's very hard to differentiate if that was human or not, especially if you take into account like a broad spectrum of humans with broad spectrum of skills. Then it becomes virtually impossible to distinguish.
That's interesting. I don't personally have so much knowledge about the music stuff. I would love to have you back a second time, a bit in the future, and talk specifically about the whole music space where you have a lot of knowledge. One thing I would like to ask you is, so at the iron scale and trying to fight phishing, is this like the never-ending battle now when we see, say, models such as GPT-3 or Cohere or AI-21 and those, and then we have the whole Hugging Face ecosystem and so on. It must really be like this consistent battle there, or like, I don't know how much you can tell or so, but kind of how is there much to say the bad guys? Have they started to adopt AI in their work, so to say, or?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if they started adopting AI in their work, but what we see sometimes is that, for instance, there are many tricks that they're using, and that's very interesting to look at them. Sometimes we see things like you have an email and there's some content in this email, and then there is a mask content that is invisible to humans because maybe it's white font or maybe something like this. Mm-hmm. This is just like some abstract poetry that sounds like generated by GPT, maybe 2, maybe 3, I don't know. It's like, it doesn't make too much sense. It's very poetic and so on. And so I'm pretty sure that these people are aware that language models might get confused by something like this. So this can be considered an adversarial attack. Maybe hard to say if for sure, but maybe they are using models for this, right? It sounds like they could. From what I read in those emails that we found. Now, from the implementation point of view and what we are trying to do and what we are trying to achieve, I must say that I'm always a little bit conservative with taking things that have a lot of hype around them.
From your point of view, what makes you most exciting right here today in AI? Like, what's the thing that amazes you and like personally very exciting?
Mm-hmm. There are three areas like this. So one is multimodal modeling, not necessarily using vision and language, but multimodal and cross-modal models is something that I think has great potential in many different areas of application. So, for instance, even if we think about combining numerical and language features in some cross-attention model, for instance, and stuff like this, I see from research and from practice that this can bring really tremendous results, really great improvements. Sometimes much greater than just applying more complex language models. So that's one field. Another field that I think is very interesting and exciting, and there's a lot of stuff going on there, but maybe it's not that visible because there is no that much hype around it. It's uncertainty modeling. So all types of models that are trying to model uncertainty around predictions, right? Classic machine learning gives you point estimates usually. So for a regression problem, you will just get one number, or if it's a multi-dimensional regression problem and a vector of numbers. In classification, you will just get class information and so on. Now, those Those estimates usually there is some model has some uncertainty around them, right? And there are two types of uncertainty: aleatoric and epistemic uncertainty. And from decision-making point of view, I think this is really crucial. So the fact that we understand in which cases the model is not sure about the prediction, and what many people tend to do naively, especially in the classification case, is just taking the softmax score from the last layer of the classification layer and treating this as an uncertainty estimate. So for instance, if model says like it's 0.95 a dog, then we say it's 95% sure that it's a dog. But if you look closer, into how softmax works, you will see that softmax is a biased function. So the probability estimate is not reliable. It's pushing the scores towards 1 and towards 0. This is the nature of softmax, right? It's trying to maximize the difference between the preferred class and other classes. Of course, you can apply temperature and so on to make it a little bit less drastic, but still it's a biased function, and it doesn't give you good estimates of uncertainty. So sometimes, just to give something more practical, if you build a medical diagnosis system, for instance, and your classifier says that your patient Anna, she has it's 95% that it's a cancer, and then you make decision on this. But then if you quantify uncertainty, so one of a simple things that you can do, you can use Monte Carlo dropout. So just leave dropout layers working when you generate predictions, and then generate hundreds or thousands of predictions, and then you will get distributions over softmax scores for each of the classes. So now you can see that maybe this 95 is in the top 5th percentile of your scores, which means that the uncertainty is very, very high, because your softmax scores for cancer were all between maybe 0.1 and 0.9, right? On 0.10, 0.9 and 0.95. This is very different understanding of what the model is telling us than if we just have one score and it's 0.95. So uncertainty estimation is the second field, and there is a lot of interesting research going on there. And the third field that I feel very excited about is causality. So this is building models that do not only learn associations in the data. These are models that are trying to either learn or estimate the causal effects, in your data. This is a very challenging problem, especially in complex real world cases. It's challenging from many different angles, but I think it's very interesting, and there's very lively research going on machine learning and causality on the edge of two fields. And also, there is not that much hype around this field today as is around like multi-model, for instance, models or NLP models even. But if you look at what is going on conferences and so on, the growth rate is already exponential for causality. So I guess we can expect a very fast growth and very fast growth of awareness in the community of those problems and how to deal with them. And the way you do with causality is different than the classic machine learning in many regards. So it's a slightly different logic. It's a slightly different approach. And for me, when I was starting with this field, some things were very counterintuitive. Like coming from frequentist statistics to causality required quite a change of a mindset. And currently, I'm working on a book on causality in Python, on causal inference and causal discovery. And this book should be ready like early next year.
Yeah, your knowledge are really astonishing and really deep. I hope we will be able to convince you at some point to come and talk more in depth about this area for the deep learning labs, lablab community. I can imagine many people would be interested in understanding it better and from a very scientific point of view, as you have. So, yes, you're writing on this book. How is that going? And is it smooth sailing, or is there a challenge writing a whole book?
It's very fulfilling on one hand, and it's very exciting, but it's a challenge. So as we discussed before, I'm currently working full time and writing a book, and I'm also married. So I'm also want to keep my relationship in good condition, and there's also social life, and other things that I'm interested in. So that's challenging. But my solution is that I'm just scheduling everything, very, very precisely, and this helps. So this is a little bit easier, but it's an intense time for me, definitely.
Yeah, maybe you can use. I think it was you had an American novel writing championship. I think the winner there had actually been using GPT-3 partly.
Yes.
Yes, a few months ago.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
so thank you for suggesting. Maybe I should collaborate with our friend GPT-3 on this.
Yeah, you must let us know once the book is out, and we will post it, of course, in our channels and spread it to the community.
Great, thank you.
So before we wrap this up, I think Olesia have a question.
Hello. Yeah, first of all, I'm very happy to see Aleksander today here. As far as I know, you was in the DLL community also, so it's really valuable to know that you was in the community and now you're here on the interview. So we're very happy to have you today. My question is more from non-tech side. From your perspective, how the AI can change our life of user of technology, not the engineers, in the pretty near future, like 2, 3, maybe 4 years?
I can only guess, right? There's a very interesting research by Professor Tetlock who says that experts usually are wrong when it comes to predicting the future. Nevertheless, I will give it a try. I think there are a couple of interesting paths. One is medicine. So from my conversations with people who are starting companies in the area of applying machine learning in medicine, or people who are interested in this topic, I hear the same thing, and I hear this from people all over the world, like from different countries. So they say that medicine is pretty conservative, which is understandable because it's about human health and human life. And because of this conservative nature of the field, many solutions that have been already applied in different fields are still very new to medicine. So I met a couple of people. I had very similar conversations with a couple of people who are trying to do AI in medicine, and they say that there's a huge potential for applying even simple machine learning to make diagnostic process more smooth, for instance. And what's interesting is that most of those people, they don't have an idea about automating fully the process, but rather making it more efficient. So it's a reality in many countries that doctors are overwhelmed, and the booking system is that they have like 15-20 minutes for the patient sometimes. So on top of this, going through diagnostic materials seems pretty challenging in many cases. So what I heard from people from the field is that building systems that help doctors to reduce or narrow the scope of potential diagnosis, for instance, for a given patient, is something that has a very good potential. So hopefully this is something that goes in a good direction. I think another interesting field is recommendation systems. So we know, and I think all of us experienced this at some point, that recommendation systems might narrow down the world that we experience digitally, right? In a sense that if I go to YouTube, I will see mostly recommendations for the content that is similar to what I've already seen or what I liked. And YouTube, from what I know, is trying to actively do something with it as well. But it's still a large part of experience online, of the experience online. So this is interesting, given the polarization, social and political polarization that we can observe all over the world. These recommendation systems work. There's research showing that they work creating echo chambers, right? So I'm not sure how to answer like which direction we will go, but I think that people who are developing algorithms and like big tech companies are more and more aware of the fact that those echo chambers are being created. So I can only express my hope that in the future those algorithms will be designed in a way that will reduce this echo chamberness of the online experience. But I must say, as a social psychologist, that this is a difficult topic. When we already have a polarization, sometimes it might be very difficult to reduce this polarization, even using like things like this, even if these technologies are advanced, because it's not only about the technology; it's also about, or mainly about, how people think and feel about the world and other people in the world.
Thank you for a really detailed answer. Especially from medic perspective, I think that a lot of users just really afraid of AI in medicine because it may be really risky for patients. And also the second thing that a lot of people are in the age that they really afraid of technology at all and not talking about the AI. And I think it's really a lot of work with people who are afraid of technology also.
I think it's a very interesting point that you made, and I think that this idea of using machine learning as something that helps humans rather than solves problems itself, especially in medicine, is a good starting point. I really believe.
Thank you so much for the question, Alesha. And I agree with you there, Alexander. I think just many people have it's very easy to have a misunderstanding what is AI, and most people thinking about AI thinking about this super intelligent computer that acting human-like with super intelligence. We will not take more of your time, but we want to thank you super much for coming here and talking about this. You are one of the most knowledgeable people I know within this area, and your background are super interesting. I hope to have you back in the future to talk a bit more about your passion and music, how we can use AI there, and maybe one day also see you talking more in depth about the more advanced topics within AI and these new areas you see. So thank you super much. I will let you go now so you can keep the life balance, family balance on the right scale there. But thank you so much, and your work is super impressive, and super glad to have you here.
Great, Mathias. Thank you. That's very kind what you said. I appreciate this. It was a pleasure to discuss with you, and thank you for your great and very insightful questions. I'll be very happy to join you again in some time.